Imagine this: you stop reaching out to a woman you've been talking to, whether it's someone you're dating, seeing casually, or even in the early stages of getting to know. The very first thing that happens isn't usually rational. It's emotional. She feels something shift immediately. At first, she may not even be fully aware of what's going on, but deep down, she senses the absence. One day you were there, present, texting, calling, showing interest. The next day, there's silence. And silence is powerful. It's not just an absence of words, it's an absence of validation, of reassurance, of connection. For someone who's been used to your presence, even in small doses, that silence rings loudly. Her initial reaction is often confusion. She starts asking herself, did something happen? Did I do something wrong? Why did he stop reaching out? And this is important because the mind doesn't like unanswered questions. We are wired to seek explanations, and when the answers aren't clear, we tend to fill in the blanks with our own assumptions. So she begins to guess. Maybe you lost interest. Maybe you found someone else. Maybe you were never as invested as she thought. And these guesses, these little stories she tells herself, trigger emotion. The absence creates an emotional ripple effect. Sometimes that emotion comes out as insecurity. She wonders if she wasn't enough, if she said the wrong thing, if she should have done more to hold your attention. That's her mind going to the worst case scenario. Other times it comes out as curiosity. She's not hurt, at least not yet, but she's alert. She's paying closer attention than she was before. She notices that you haven't texted today. Then she notices it's been 2 days. By day 3, it's not just something she notices. It's something she feels. And here's the fascinating part. When you remove your presence, you automatically shift her emotional state because people don't tend to value what feels guaranteed. They value what feels uncertain. When you're always there, always calling, always texting, she doesn't need to think about whether you're invested. She knows you are. But when you pull back, suddenly, she's left with the space to question, and in that questioning, she feels the absence. Now, some people will say, well, that sounds manipulative. You're saying don't call or don't text just to make her chase. That's not what this is about. This isn't about playing games. It's about recognizing that silence is communication. When you step back, you reveal where the emotional investment really lies, because her reaction tells you a lot. Some women will immediately feel insulted or hurt, and they'll shut down too. Others will start testing the waters. Maybe she sends a quick text like, "Hey, how's your day?" or reacts to something on your social media just to see if you'll take the bait. In that moment, she's not just casually checking in. She's trying to understand why the dynamic has changed. And let's be clear, this initial emotional response is rarely logical. Logic comes later. In the moment, it's instinctive. She misses your presence. She may not want to admit it. She may even tell herself she doesn't care. But she feels it, and that's the point. Human beings don't usually recognize the value of something until they experience its absence. That's why when you stop contacting her, the very first stage is emotional impact. It creates awareness. It forces her to notice what she had, because it's not there anymore. Think about it like this. If you drink coffee every single morning, you don't think twice about it. It's part of your day, it's consistent, you rely on it. But the day you wake up and there's no coffee, suddenly you realize how much you depended on it. That moment of absence creates a craving. The same thing happens in relationships and connections. The consistent presence becomes expected. The sudden lack creates an emotional jolt. And what matters most here is what she does with that feeling. Because at first, it's not about her making a rational decision. It's about her experiencing the gap. That gap can either make her lean in, or it can make her retreat, depending on what she thinks your silence means. But no matter what, the first step is always the same. She feels it. She notices the missing energy. This is why so many people underestimate the power of doing nothing. We think we have to say more, do more, prove ourselves more. But sometimes the biggest impact comes not from what you do, but from what you don't do. And when you stop contacting her, her very first response will always come from that deep, emotional place inside her. She feels the absence. When you stop contacting a woman after the initial wave of emotions, confusion, curiosity, maybe even insecurity, the next thing that happens is this: she begins to test your intentions. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, she doesn't just sit in silence forever, wondering what's going on. At some point, she'll want to know if your silence is deliberate or just circumstantial. Was it that you were busy for a few days? Or have you genuinely pulled back? That question drives her next move, and it's where the testing begins. These tests aren't always obvious. In fact, more often than not, they're subtle. She might send you something small, like a meme or a quick, casual message, something that doesn't look like she's putting herself out there too much. But what she's really doing is gauging your response. She's asking, without actually asking, are you still there? Do you still care? And your response, or your lack of it, tells her everything she needs to know. Sometimes the test is even smaller. Maybe she watches your story on social media and leaves a little reaction. Maybe she likes one of your posts, just enough to get noticed, but not enough to seem like she's chasing you. These small gestures are her way of saying, I'm still in the game, but I'm not about to hand you all the power. She's trying to find out if the silence between you is intentional or just circumstantial. Now, why does she test in this way? Because nobody wants to be vulnerable to rejection without a safety net. If she outright texted, "Why haven't you been calling me?" and you ignored her, that would sting. That's too direct, too exposing. But if she sends a casual, "Hey, how's your week going?" she hasn't risked much. If you don't respond, she can brush it off. If you do, she gets her answer. It's a safer way to test where she stands without putting her pride on the line. Here's the fascinating thing: when she begins testing, it means your absence has already created impact. She wouldn't test if she didn't care. She wouldn't test if she hadn't noticed. The very act of her reaching out in even the smallest way is proof that she feels the shift. That silence of yours has created a question in her mind, and her test is her way of trying to solve it. Now, the danger here for a lot of men is they see the test and immediately jump back in with everything they've got. She sends one message, and suddenly they're overcompensating, calling, texting, showering her with attention to prove they're still there. But when you do that, you remove the tension that made her curious in the first place. You undo the very thing that was working in your favor. The point of her testing is to find out if she still has your attention. If you respond with a tidal wave of effort, you give her the certainty she didn't have, and certainty kills attraction. The smarter move is to recognize the test for what it is, not an invitation to chase, but a sign that she's wondering about you. Respond, but don't rush to over-deliver. Let the exchange stay balanced. If she asks how your week is, tell her, but don't suddenly launch into a love letter. If she reacts to your story, appreciate it, but don't turn it into an excuse to flood her inbox. The beauty of her test is that it shows she's still invested, but you need to let her investment grow, not smother it with reassurance. Another way she tests is by waiting to see how long you can actually hold your silence. If you've been the one initiating most of the time, she may sit back and think, "Let me see how long it takes before he reaches out again." She's testing the pattern. If you always break first, she knows she doesn't have to put much effort in. But if you hold your ground, if you're genuinely okay with not reaching out, she learns that your attention isn't something she can take for granted. That's when her respect grows. That's when she starts considering whether she needs to meet you in the middle. It's not about mind games, it's about balance. If you've been doing all the chasing, all the calling, all the initiating, she hasn't had to show you her level of interest. When you pull back, it creates space for her to reveal it. Her tests are the first sign of that. They're the small, safe steps she takes to find out if you're still open to her. And if she takes them, it's a clear sign she values your presence enough to check if it's still there. What you need to remember is this: the test is never the end point. It's a bridge. It's her way of deciding whether she should lean in more or whether she should let go. And how you handle that test determines what comes next. If you rush to erase the silence, she feels like she has you exactly where she wants you, and the dynamic shifts back to her control. If you respond calmly, confidently, without overcompensating, you keep that balance of power intact. You show her that you're not desperate for her attention, but you're also not closed off to it. When you stop contacting her, she will test you. Not to play games, not to trick you, but to figure out what your silence really means. When you stop contacting a woman, one of the most powerful shifts that happens is in the balance of power. Up until that point, she may have felt like she knew exactly where things stood. If you were the one always reaching out, always checking in, always keeping the connection alive, then she held a kind of unspoken control over the situation. She could decide how much to respond, when to respond, whether to deepen things or keep them casual, because she knew you'd always be there making the effort. But when you go quiet, that sense of certainty she had begins to crumble, and with it, the dynamic between you starts to change. This shift can be unsettling for her, because we often don't realize how much comfort we've been drawing from knowing someone is always available until suddenly they're not. Think about it. When someone is consistently reaching out, you never really have to question their interest. You don't have to risk much yourself because you know they'll keep showing up. It's safe. But when that consistency disappears, it puts the ball back in your court, and now she's the one left to wonder. That wondering is what flips the power dynamic. Now, this doesn't mean power in some cold, manipulative sense. I'm not talking about games. What I'm talking about is the natural balance of energy in a relationship. Attraction grows when there's reciprocity, when both people are showing interest, both are investing, both are taking risks. But when it becomes one-sided, when one person is always doing the chasing, the other naturally falls into the role of being chased. And being chased feels nice. It feels validating. But it doesn't necessarily spark deep attraction. So when you stop contacting her, what you've really done is rebalance the scales. You've created space for her to step forward instead of sitting back. She may not like that shift at first. She may even feel slightly off balance by it. But it's often in that very moment that she starts to reflect on her role in the connection. Suddenly, she's not just passively receiving your energy. She's being invited to give some back. This is why silence has such an impact. It interrupts the rhythm she was used to. If she was in the habit of you always being the one to check in, then when you don't, She has to decide whether to let the connection fade or whether to do something to keep it alive. And that decision forces her to reveal something she hasn't had to show before: her level of investment. Now, here's where it gets interesting. For some women, the shift in dynamics can actually make them more intrigued. They suddenly see you differently. Instead of being the guy who's always available, always at her disposal, you've become the guy who values his own time, his own energy, and who doesn't hand it out without thought. That change in perception is powerful. Respect is born from scarcity, not abundance. When she sees that you don't need to chase, that you're okay with pulling back, she can't help but respect that. And respect is one of the most attractive qualities there is. Of course, not every woman reacts the same way. Some will feel frustrated by the shift. They'll feel like they've lost the upper hand, and their instinct may be to retreat even further. But that's not a bad thing. It simply tells you where her level of investment really was. If she only valued your attention when it was free and constant, but not enough to meet you halfway when it wasn't, then you've learned something vital about the connection. Other women, though, will feel the change and rise to meet it. They'll begin to initiate more. They'll start reaching out. Not because they suddenly need validation, but because they don't want to lose the connection. That shift transforms the relationship from one-sided to mutual. And that's when things become real, because you're no longer the only one doing the work. It's important to see this dynamic shift not as a tactic, but as a natural recalibration. Relationships, especially in the early stages, are about discovering where the balance lies. Too much pursuit on one side tips the scales, and eventually attraction suffers. By stepping back, by not contacting her, you allow the balance to restore itself. And in that restored balance, you'll find out who she really is when she's not being chased. So, when the silence sets in and she begins to feel that loss of control, what's really happening is growth. Growth for her because she's being asked to consider what she truly wants. Growth for you because you're no longer attaching your value to how quickly you can win her attention. And growth for the connection itself, because if it survives this shift, it comes out stronger and more equal than before. When you stop contacting her, you don't just remove your presence, you reset the entire dynamic. When you stop contacting a woman, something very natural begins to happen. She starts reflecting and reassessing. And this part is crucial because it's not just about you anymore. It's about her relationship with herself, her values, her expectations, and the reality of what she feels for you. The silence you've created isn't just an empty space, it's a mirror. It forces her to take a long, hard look at what this connection really means to her. In the beginning, she may tell herself stories to explain your silence. Maybe you're busy, maybe you got distracted, maybe you just need a little space. But as time passes, she moves from speculation into reflection. She begins to ask deeper questions. Questions that don't just revolve around you, but around the relationship itself. What did I actually feel with him? Did he make me feel seen, valued, important? Was I genuinely interested in him? Or did I just like the attention? These aren't questions she would have bothered to ask if you were still contacting her every day. The routine of your presence would have kept her from needing to think about them. But in your absence, the truth starts to surface. This reflection stage is powerful because it strips away the noise. Without the distraction of constant texts or calls, she has to sit with her real feelings, and those feelings can go in a few directions. Sometimes, she realizes she misses more than just the attention. She misses you. She misses the way you made her laugh, the comfort she felt when she talked to you, the energy you brought into her life. That kind of reflection draws her closer because she realizes it wasn't just casual for her. Other times, though, the silence exposes something different. Maybe she realizes she didn't feel as strongly as she thought. Maybe she recognizes she was only half invested, enjoying the chase more than the connection itself. And in that case, she may decide to step back completely. As painful as that might sound, it's actually clarity. A clarity you wouldn't have gotten if you'd kept pushing, because constant contact often masks the reality of someone's feelings. There's also a subtle but important part of this process. She doesn't just reflect on you, she reflects on herself. She asks, why do I care that he stopped reaching out? Why does this affect me so much? And the answers she gives herself reveal a lot about what she wants. If she values connection, stability, and emotional honesty, she may decide that if you're pulling back, she's not willing to chase. On the other hand, if she sees real potential in what you had, she may realize it's worth putting in effort to show you she's interested. Either way, her reassessment is giving both of you clarity that can't come from endless back and forth messages. Now, here's the beauty of this stage. It's not forced. You're not asking her to reflect. You're not telling her to evaluate her feelings. You're simply creating the space where reflection naturally happens. It's human nature to analyze the things we no longer have easy access to. That's why someone who's always there fades into the background. But the moment they step back, we start thinking about them constantly. The mind fills the silence with questions, with possibilities, with meaning. That's exactly what she's doing, assigning meaning to your absence. And in the process, figuring out what this connection really is to her. It's also worth noting that reflection is not instant. It unfolds gradually. On day 1, she might just be curious. On day 3, she's wondering if she should send you a message. By day 5 or 6, she's starting to reflect on the bigger picture. That's when she asks herself, do I actually want him in my life? Or am I just uncomfortable with losing attention? Those are two very different answers, and the one she chooses will shape what happens next. For you, this reassessment is gold, because instead of constantly trying to prove yourself, instead of trying to convince her of your value, you're letting her come to her own conclusion. And when someone chooses you freely, after reflecting, that choice carries far more weight than if they were simply swept up in the moment. When she reaches the point where she decides, I want him in my life, it comes from a genuine place of clarity. Of course, the risk is that her reflection leads her the other way. She may decide she doesn't feel strongly enough to pursue you. But that's not a loss. That's truth. And truth is always better than chasing someone who was never really invested to begin with. You'd rather know that now, through her reassessment, than waste months trying to build something that was never mutual. So, in the silence, while you're holding back, she's doing the work you couldn't do for her. She's thinking, evaluating, questioning, deciding. And whatever conclusion she comes to, you end up with the clarity you need. Because silence isn't just absence. It's a space that demands honesty. When you stop contacting her, she starts reflecting on what the connection really means, and that reflection reveals the truth you've been waiting for. When you stop contacting a woman, something very telling begins to happen. After the initial emotions, after the testing, after that shift in power, and the reflection that follows, she reaches a point where she has to make a choice. And this choice is where you finally see her true colors. She will either pursue or she will withdraw. This is the fork in the road. And here's the interesting part, it's not always dramatic. Sometimes pursuit is subtle. It may not look like grand gestures or long messages. It could be as simple as her suddenly initiating more than she used to. Maybe she sends you a text that actually has substance, not just a quick emoji or a casual "Hey." Maybe she asks when you're free, or she makes an effort to bring up something meaningful, just to reopen the line of communication. Those small actions are her way of leaning in. They're her way of saying, "I do value this, and I don't want to lose it." Other times, pursuit is more direct. She'll call, she'll ask why she hasn't heard from you, she'll make plans to see you. That's a woman deciding, "I want this connection, and I'm not afraid to show it." And when that happens, you know you've reached a different stage because she's no longer sitting back waiting to be pursued. She's investing. She's showing you with her actions that she's interested, and that's the kind of clarity you can't manufacture by chasing her endlessly yourself. But not every woman will pursue. Some will withdraw. And withdrawal doesn't always mean she doesn't care. Sometimes it's a defense mechanism. She may feel vulnerable, or she may interpret your silence as rejection. If she believes you've lost interest, her pride or her self-protection instinct may kick in, and she'll match your silence with silence of her own. In other cases, though, withdrawal is a clearer sign. It's her way of saying, "This didn't mean enough to me to fight for." And as painful as that can feel, it's actually a gift, because you've just been given the truth without wasting more of your energy. The important thing to recognize here is that pursuit and withdrawal are both answers. They both reveal where she stands. If she pursues, it tells you she cares. If she withdraws, it tells you she doesn't care enough. Either way, you no longer have to guess. The silence has created a moment of truth, and her choice fills in the blanks. Now, here's what's fascinating about this stage. So many men fear the withdrawal so much that they never even give space for the pursuit to happen. They can't stand the uncertainty. They think, what if she loses interest? What if she never comes back? And so they rush back in before she ever gets the chance to show them anything. But in doing that, they rob themselves of the clarity. They never see what she would have done, because they never stopped doing all the work. The reality is, if she withdraws, she was never going to be the right one to begin with. A relationship where one person is constantly pulling all the weight is not a relationship built on mutual attraction. It's built on dependency. But if she pursues, then you've got something far more valuable: mutual investment. And that doesn't happen unless you give her the chance to show it. It's also worth mentioning that pursuit doesn't make her weak, and withdrawal doesn't make her cruel. It's just human. Some people step forward when they feel the absence, others step away. What matters is that now you can see the truth. And once you see it, you can stop wasting time trying to guess or trying to force something that isn't really there. This stage is also where respect really solidifies, because if she does pursue, it's not just about missing your presence. It's about respecting you enough to show effort. And if she withdraws, you respect yourself enough to let it go. Either way, the silence has created an opportunity for both of you to act from a place of truth, not from habit or convenience. That's why this stage matters so much. It's not about whether she comes closer or walks away. It's about finally seeing what's real. And once you've seen it, you can move forward without doubts, without games, without wasting energy on someone who won't meet you where you are. When you stop contacting her, she will either pursue or withdraw, and either choice will give you the clarity you need. When you stop contacting a woman, after all the emotions, the testing, the shift in dynamics, the reflection, and the decision to either pursue or withdraw, she eventually reaches the final stage. And this is where everything becomes clear. She redefines her priorities. She takes all the feelings, all the uncertainty, all the space that's been created, and she uses it to decide what she truly wants for herself moving forward. This is the stage where she stops reacting and starts choosing. Up until now, her behavior has been about trying to make sense of the change, why you went quiet, what it means, what she should do in response. But once she's had enough time to process, she turns the focus back inward. Instead of asking, "Why isn't he contacting me?" she starts asking, "What do I want from this? Do I even want him in my life? Do I see a future here, or is it time for me to move on?" And that's a powerful shift, because now she's not just responding to your actions, she's actively shaping her own. It's in this stage that you really see her values come through. If she sees you as someone who genuinely mattered to her, someone who added value to her life, she may decide that the silence isn't worth losing you over. She'll prioritize reconnecting, putting energy into rebuilding the connection, and showing up in a more intentional way. That's not just about missing attention anymore. That's about choosing you. On the other hand, she may redefine her priorities in the opposite direction. She might come to the conclusion that chasing your presence isn't aligned with what she wants. Maybe she realizes she was holding on for the wrong reasons. Maybe she values her peace, her independence, or her self-respect more than the uncertainty of waiting around. And so she lets go. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. She simply decides that her time and energy are better spent elsewhere. Either way, what's happening here is growth. And growth is always good. Because in this process, she gets clarity about her needs, her standards, and what she's willing to give to someone. And you get clarity too, because her decision tells you exactly where you stand, without you having to drag it out of her. This stage also reveals something important about attraction. It's not enough for someone to enjoy your company in the moment. For something meaningful to last, they have to decide to prioritize you. They have to make space for you in their life, not just when it's convenient, but because they see value in keeping you there. That's what makes relationships real. Two people not just liking each other, but choosing each other. Now, here's what makes this stage so freeing for you. You no longer have to guess. You don't have to chase. You don't have to manipulate. You don't have to beg for her attention. You simply observe what she chooses when you're not filling the silence for her. Does she redefine her priorities to include you? Or does she redefine them in a way that excludes you? Whichever direction she goes, you now have your answer. And there's something deeply attractive about being a person who allows this process to unfold. It shows that you're not desperate, that you respect yourself enough to let someone decide for themselves if they want to be there. Because that's the kind of confidence that inspires respect in return. When you stop chasing and instead give space for someone to reveal where you fit in their life. You stop forcing connections that aren't meant to be, and you allow the right ones to prove themselves naturally. Think about it. When someone chooses to prioritize you, even after the silence, it means they see real value in you. It means you're not just someone who filled a gap of boredom or loneliness. You're someone they want to keep in their life because of who you are, not because of how available you've been. That kind of choice is powerful. It's intentional. And it's the foundation for a relationship that can actually last. And if she doesn't prioritize you, if she chooses to walk away, that's still a win. Because she's just saved you from pouring energy into something that was never going to meet your needs. She's shown you where she stands, and now you're free to put your time into someone who will prioritize you without hesitation. Either way, the silence has given you the truth. And the truth is always better than living in uncertainty. So this final stage isn't about loss or victory. It's about clarity. It's about allowing her to make her choice and respecting whatever choice that is. Because when you stop contacting her, the last and most important thing she will do is redefine her priorities. And in that decision, you'll finally see whether you were ever truly one of them